Just wanted to show a slide about organizers and panelists whom we have here. In terms of organizers on site, we have me, myself, and my colleague Boniface Vitapa from Center for Youth Empowerment and Leadership. In terms of participants, we have Olga Cavalli from ISOC Argentina chapter president. So she's also advisor Minister of Foreign Affairs of Argentina. We have Andrei Sherbovich from the National Research University High School of Economics from Russia, Moscow. We have remote panelists, Sarah Kaiden from Web and E-Learning Administrator from Uganda Christian University. We have Professor Tao Feng from Beijing University of Post and Telecommunications, who is Deputy Director of Key Laboratory of Universal Wireless Communications in China and Chief Architect of 4G TDD Working Group and most. We have Patrick Ryan here from Google. And we have some, let's say, more panelists who are coming to join our discussion today. So we are going to follow the schedule with small, short introduction to the problem of quality of online content, online education, problem of digital divide, and after that I will show questions which we are going to discuss. We have, of course, more questions to discuss, right? But we are limited in time, and so I would like also to ask on-site participants here to participate in our discussion, as we have round table, we have panel which is not limited to just panelists. So okay. In terms of empowerment or quality online control, today there is a fast increasing number of massive open online courses, open data, educational content, or open educational resources, right? And the process is getting even faster with emerging technologies like mobile or virtual and augmented reality. More and more educational programs depend on internet resources. And online education services now are major approaches for empowerment people. We have different services already introduced for educational resources, for educational platforms, and just in general for education. We have access, so we have access anyway to large and unregulated body of information which exists on the internet. But this access suggests that we need quality control and critical evaluation of related internet resources, because information there might be unscientific when we're talking about education, right? Thus, there should be some basic principles of quality control of different services, especially when we are talking about educational content. The thing is, this year it was the first time when UNESCO put at the post-conference one of the major area is quality and relevant teaching and learning. So it's their priority area starting from this year. We know different programs running under the UNESCO umbrella, information for all, education for all, right? Before, they were focusing on access, giving access to everybody, right? To everyone, to information for education. But this year they also started focusing on the quality of content, which is accessible to everyone here. I also would like to emphasize that education is a big area for different companies and organizations. So we know examples of massive open online courses platforms, right? So from their perspective, because we had, let's say, discussion with them before the workshop in order to get their position about quality of online content, how they are going to ensure quality of online content, how they are going to ensure that these courses they are providing on their platforms, are bringing some scientific data, or are bringing knowledge to participants who are going to apply for these courses. So they said they rely mostly on universities because they collaborate with universities. So nowadays, right? But we know that education, it's not just about universities when we are talking about online access, right? but it's also about ordinary people sharing their information, sharing their videos, right, through the YouTube service, through some other, services, sharing it for, for everyone. That's why now we, they don't have clear position about quality of control. So they, they move it to the universities level. Another important point there that, for instance, educational market. Just to remind you, all educational market last year was measured approximately from 60 to 70 billion US dollars, and it's growing. It's growing by 20% per year, sometimes even more. Some statistics, from Russian side, being representative of academia there, I would say that Russian online education market is just 5 million US dollars, which was measured last year. But what I would like to say is that we have also some other markets, and we have different transformations. So we have corporate educational sector, which is actively using online educational resources, right? And for instance, in terms of, again, Russia, in terms of the market there, it's approximately 2 billion US dollars just for corporate sector. We also have some private teachers starting using online resources. So we are talking about this market. We are talking about these content generators, let's say so, right? For educational use. And so we should somehow ensure the quality of content they're providing, and someone is going to use, either up to some standards, right? I think, from my side, in terms of introduction to a point of problem with, with education online content, that's it. I would like to give the floor to Boniface Vitaba, who is co-organizer of the workshop, to slightly dive into digital divide problem with open education resources. And after that, we will move to the questions. Please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Komarov. Thank you, Dr. Komarov. As I said, my name is Boniface Vitaba from Kenya, Center for Youth Empowerment and Leadership. To delve into the topic right away, as we all know, the internet started as a government project back in the late 1960s. And back then, it was meant for military and research purposes. But it's opening up to the world in the late 80s, brought tremendous opportunities to the globe as a whole. Basically, today it's difficult to point out an area in our lives that's not affected by the internet. In the field of education, the first increased demand in education and training is that traditional methods do not suffice to take developing countries beyond universal primary education into the wider education for all agenda. So the question that remains begging is, what do we do in order to bridge this gap? So the UNESCO touts open educational resources, that is OERs, as an avenue to foster development as well as improve learning in schools. So to the next speaker, probably what you should be able to cover is, how do we use OERs? How do we leverage the use of OERs to foster development? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boniface. So as you already started, touching a bit some questions, I also would like to give a floor to Andrei Sherbovic, and after that, to give a floor to all the panelists to answer not just on this question you mentioned, which is already included, for questions for our discussion, but also to some of the questions, for discussion itself. So please, Andrei, could you please explain some legal aspects and legal problems we have in terms of quality of content? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I'd like to present some issues which are most important in United Nations aspect, maybe in all socio-cultural aspects, that is problems of non-profit institutions in online education, especially in sphere and in the field of human rights. This is one of the most issues which is submitted by the problems raised by the General Assembly of the United Nations, which proclaimed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and think that achievement of the goals of the Universal Declaration and education is one of the points and one of the main things to achieve the goals of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As we know, some other international documents confirming these statements made by Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. One of the most important from them are Convention of the Rights of the Child, Article 29. Also, Vienna Declaration and Program of Action of 1993. Which confirmed rights of education not only for the children but also for other people. About distant and electronic education, there is a key issue, key organizer is UNESCO, which has two programs, Education for All and Information for All, and they are major international intergovernmental programs which support distant education and education through the tools of internet. Besides United Nations institutions, there are also made very important role belongs to organizations which are on non-profit base, but those non-profit organizations are teaching human rights. For example, one of the examples are course on freedom of expression, freedom made by Amnesty International. This is one of the first human rights open course, which is accessible for everyone on different languages. And there is they position themselves as a global leader in online education and human rights, and trying to deliver a new series of massive open online courses on different areas of human rights problems. This Amnesty International with this course is dealing in cooperation with some educational institutions like Harvard University and other on their own website or positioning. Some other non-profit organizations are Human Rights Education Associates, which based in the United States, and the University of Peace, also providing courses related to the peace and human rights problems. The next one is based in Russia on non-profit organization Sakharov Center, named by academic Andrei Sakharov, which also making an online distant course on human rights. I think in a sphere of online education, not only in human rights field, but primarily in human rights fields, there are one of the basic things is authority of this kind of international or national non-profit organization, and this authority could bring a very high quality online educational content. Also, if there is non-profit projects on the measure of this kind, there could be kind of pro bono educational programs which could be performed by very high quality professionals who not receiving any honors for this, but they could be very good in sphere of maybe volunteer educational programs in cooperation with non-profit organizations. In the last of my presentation, I will return to the United Nations system. One of the most important initiatives in education, there is kind of United Nations cyber school bus, which created even in 1996, and this is one of the most important educational platforms which based on the United Nations itself, and this is kind of explanation not only for school children but also for students, which explaining the core of the United Nations system, its values, and also human rights problem. Finally, I would like to answer on the question about the digital divide gap, and I think that this kind of education, the education and sphere of human rights, I think could simply could simply overcome the digital divide gap, because this kind of education is more important to develop societies, which could also make these contributions for our common digital divide. Because I think in sphere of culture, in sphere of education, these kind of online educational systems could be simply major instruments for overcoming this digital divide through the culture, through the cultural educational process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Yes, so quality depends on authorities providing content. Yeah, that's. I think it's important to to fix this statement. So, what about organizations providing services? Different services for for educational resources, or for generating some open content like YouTube or others. So, Patrick, do you have some comments about it?
Sure, I'm sure I have lots of comments. Can I just make sure I understand the question is what is the, could you just rephrase the question for me, please?
So, what about organizations providing services, right? Internet services for either further, educational services, right? Within this, like Google Docs or YouTube or some other, let's say, services available online for for users, and which helps them to generate content and afterwards used for like for education purposes, for instance. So if these companies should ensure quality control, or if they use already some mechanisms or algorithms to identify what is what's wrong there inside, or something like that. What do you think about it?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation to come here. This is the second or third time I've participated in this event, and you've continue on this theme and really pressing hard on these difficult issues about online education. I know this is something that's very important to the to the citizens and students where you come from. It's also something that's very important to many of the participants here, because using educational resources online is just one of the most fundamental good things that can happen on the internet, because we can all learn. And there are a lot of tools available that are increasingly available for free to be able to do that. And the question is YouTube one of those tools, and how should, if I understand the question, is how should this content be controlled, regulated, reviewed, if at all? And this is a subject of considerable debate around the world, because there are many different cultural views on this topic. The platform that we have at Google is really founded on a principle of user-generated content and enabling users to really put just about anything they want online, so that it can be there forever, freely accessible, as they may wish. They may wish to have it be deployed to the world, or be available to the world as a public link. They may just be backing up their own personal library. We want to give users that control, but we also want to give them the opportunity to really put all of that information online, and to enable a whole new form of journalism, a form of communication, and ways to share and retain information that has never really existed before at this scale. So in order for that that's a long explanation in order to say that in order for that kind of ecosystem to thrive, there needs to be a strong appreciation for community-based controls, and for just the good sense of users in many different ways. Now that's complemented by rules in the community that do have takedowns and can lead to removal of content. But that's not because content is not of a particular quality, right? And so the types of content that we would remove would be content that would be either including nudity and other things that would vary from the principles of YouTube's platform, which is to really be a family-friendly platform. There's some variation in what family-friendly means, and then we rely on the community to help rate and rank some of those things in order to say what they are. Now, whether something is good or bad, that's a different metric. That has to do with, in our view, mostly with a very simple metric of clicks and views. Are people using it? Are people watching it? In many ways, that's the way that the company's is founded. Google itself, the search engine Google, is based on the premise that the information that most people are looking at is probably going to be more like the information that you want. There's a few options of similar choices, but for the most part, all Google's algorithm does is look at what people are doing on the web. They're doing things that are similar to you, and then serving it up and saying, here, this might be interesting to you. And so in the case of content, it's very similar, whether it's an article that you find online, or whether it's a video that you find online through YouTube or through another service. You're likely to find more relevant content if other people find it relevant, and so that's approval of the crowd, and it certainly has a context that makes some societies very uncomfortable, because we've been used to having authorities and people that are charged with responsibility for making sure that content and information is really appropriate for the citizenry. In many cases, we're used to having other authorities do that. Not everywhere, but in a lot of cases we are. And seeing these traditions, really conflict with cultural values is something new. But that's essentially a long way of saying that we really don't believe that there's a place for us to be doing content control, other than putting the mechanism in place to let the community do that.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So quite interesting, I would say, approach from private sector. But here we have Olga, presenting also governmental sector. So, for the government, yes, we have different standards, of educational content, for instance. But what about online content, from governmental perspective? Probably some examples from your side.
Can you hear me? Hello, my name is Olga Cavalli. First, I want to thank you, Mikhail, for inviting me, and apologies for not being able to participate years before. It somehow overlapped with other activities, and honestly, this is I find this issue of content of extremely relevance, especially for developing countries. especially for countries like Argentina, where I live, or for Latin America, which is a region with such a diverse variety of social economic groups, of huge geography, big countries with very highly populated areas on very scarcely populated areas. And this is extremely challenging for develop an infrastructure and for developing content to access those people that want to access to education. What I would like to say first, as a general comment, and I am always an optimistic person, rather saying no to some of these initiatives, I would rather go to, okay, let's analyze what is it, in which context, and what we are talking about. I have a similar feeling about zero rating content. I was in the session yesterday, and some of the remarks made that were kind of open to analyzing and put it into context, those are the ones that I find more constructive. Because sometimes, and let me think about someone living in a rural area in a country without access to other technology than a mobile phone or a tablet that could be provided by the country, by the government, and having access to an encyclopedia like Wikipedia that could change their lives. And I usually say that when I was a child, at home I had only 2 TV channels in black and white. Yes, I'm an old lady. And I used to watch Star Trek. And that changed my life forever, because I wanted to build that starship. I wanted to be an engineer, and I became an engineer. And somehow, that TV show that, of course, was a fantasy, but it is not such a fantasy, it became part of my daily life and my career elections. So this content can change the life of many people. And this is why I want to stress the value for developing countries. I also would like to share with you, I am a university teacher. Also, I work, as Michael said, as advisor to the government of Argentina. I used to be a teacher in the diplomacy career because I am advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And there I said, what can I do to make these people to be, they're mainly lawyers and political science specialists. Very few are technology oriented. And I said, and I used to teach technology to them, introduction to technology. So I said, how can I make them get interested in this? And what they had to do was to prepare content in Spanish in Wikipedia of those issues that we reviewed in our classes. And it was extremely challenging for them because they were not technically oriented or technically skilled. But the experience was fantastic. And also what we wanted to do was to enhance content in Spanish with academic quality. So we wanted to enhance Wikipedia. And as a university teacher, I had many discussions with colleagues of mine that don't allow my students to use Wikipedia as a source, which I find really silly. My comment to my students, I say, okay, use Wikipedia and try to find other sources and check the content. Don't stick to only one source of information. Check with others. And I'm very happy to see that there are several open educational contents in Latin America. The language barrier is relevant. What I wanted to do with my students at the university when we did that Wikipedia project for 3 or 4 years a while ago was to enhance the content in Wikipedia in Spanish with quality from a university level. And we succeeded very much. It was the content generated was very good. So maybe I will stop here. And my message is, if you and talking about quality, if you find a source of an open training course with the content, and maybe you have doubts about the quality, my suggestion to someone trying to take it is go to the sources of the information, check the organizations involved in the development of that content, and perhaps if you have relevant information from there, check that with other sources. I used to study at the time that the books were in the library, in a place, and you have to be there, or you have to be a friend of the professor that had the nice book, and he should lend it to you. That time is gone. You have many more resources now to check the sources, to check the quality, and to double check if that is okay or not. But I would say that, and also I think Patrick made a very interesting comment, the community revision, the community in relation with the content. I have encyclopedias at home that I printed in paper, and they have mistakes, and they will have them forever unless I burn them. But if it's in Wikipedia, and I've written many, many Wikipedia articles, very quickly people comment, and people go there and make changes. So that's the power of the internet. And I will stop here, and I'm happy to address other questions.
Thank you very much, Olga. Interesting suggestion. So, dear panelists, so what do you think, who is responsible for content quality control? Now, after these comments, probably some best practices. And what do you think, if these open educational resources, if they bridge the digital divide gap or not, if they help or not? And by the way, continuing, this, what do you think? It's should we first teach media literacy, right? In order to understand what is quality, right, in terms of content. So what's matter, what's relation? Just to the panelists itself, So who is going to answer first? Okay, Olga, yes, yeah.
Bothering you with my with my talk. I think there are different types of content, and all of them are useful. Some articles could be informative, and they don't need to be necessarily extremely complicated or extremely, I would say, in English, in Spanish, it would be a very much academic style or extremely complex. But an informative article could be extremely useful for many people as a starting point. I think that's, for example, the focus of Wikipedia or other non-encyclopedia. And then from there start the investigation towards other contents that could be more complex and more checked before they are available. So I will leave other colleagues to comment as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't think this is a very easy answer for it. First step, I think, would encourage university teachers and the public to produce open courses as many as possible. Once we have a large amount of open courses, we will be able to filter out these low-quality courses. Take China, for example. In order to assess the quality of an open course, the Chinese Ministry of Education used to invite experts in this area, also students, to the publicly review these courses. Thank you.
Tracy, please. Thank you very much. Please.
Right. So, good afternoon, everyone. I would just like to pick on the community point, which I think is very important, and from the standpoint of a small country like where I come from, and the communities, we do see a lot of knowledge emerging, and in my work, where we have built a few access centers and asking the community to come in and to utilize the centers and to consume content, we also, on the other hand, want them to create content. And I do think that there's a possibility that education resources can emerge from the community that's a contextual to what they do. So as an example, I wouldn't expect a university to be extremely proficient in basket making or fishing, but that could come from a community where that industry or that way of life is endemic, and building the content again with the literacy levels, allowing it to be put online at least first, and then perhaps revised for quality and for and for other issues by perhaps some experts in that area. I think there could be a richer level of content emerging that the internet and the tools that are available, YouTube and Coursera and Khan Academy and all those other emerging technologies and emerging platforms that exist, that we can start to see new forms and new ways of learning and new waves of material. So I wouldn't go to university to learn how to fish, but let's go to this location and this particular platform where a fishing or basket making or bracelet making course might be available. And again, that creates a new class of entrepreneurs, it creates a new level of empowerment. And the key is that the communities themselves become empowered to not only continue creating content, but also to themselves perhaps see it as a business and become more literate and use the internet further, become more involved in digital economies. I think it's a possibility for a ripple on and a knock-on effect on all a series of areas, and themselves in the future becoming content and quality gatekeepers for people coming up thereafter in their communities and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Andre, you have some comments, and I'm wondering about our technical assistance. If we have remote participants, remote panelists wishing to comment something. If we have remote participants wishing to comment, or could you please? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We have just one comment from Deneng from Africa. He says, the future of the internet in Africa lies in building of communication infrastructure like fiber cables. He left this comment.
Okay, thank you very much. So, comment from Andre, yes, please. Yeah, so switching is...
Yes, it's working. I'd like just to add something about the quality of online content. So, this quality depends, I think, on the communities within which the courses produced. If the content provider is the most authoritative international organization, as I provided in my report, this is could be understandable. But also, I think this is as on which internet, because the problem of quality of the content is a problem not only of the educational resources. It's always the problem of the whole internet, which is required user-generated content. This is a kind of a drawback of the free flow of information. As we could see, everyone could also produce some educational courses on his own base, but this is a question of usage and popularity of this. If there will be of the bad quality, nobody would come to attend. So there is a voting of attendance, could be. So this is a really good estimation by the people who attended the course. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andre. Any comments? Patrick, you want to comment something?
I have a question that if I may ask, a couple questions for either you or for Andre. I'm curious just to understand the context of the approval of classroom material. In other contexts other than online education, let's just say books or articles. If you're a professor and you're responsible for putting together a course, and you choose certain articles that are relevant, or choose to have somebody in case of law read a case that's relevant, or even assign a book, is any of that material approved separately through any or accredited in any way?
So I can comment. Yeah. Yes, yeah, Olga. Okay, probably you first.
What I can comment, and I think I didn't comment before because I was enthusiastic talking about other details, is that in Argentina we have this fantastic program that has granted more than 5 million computers to students. But they have also developed specific content, which is both online and it's on CDs for those that have no internet access. So those CDs can be delivered to distant parts of the country. And there is a fantastic TV channel, which is called Canal Encuentro. Encuentro means in Spanish that you get together. And so the content in Encuentro is really educational. It's mainly produced in Argentina. It has also some content produced in other countries. It's in Spanish. And it is distributed all over the country through the new digital television network, which covers the whole country. So this is an interesting example. That content is prepared, and this goes to your question about certification. This content goes to this content is revised by a special agency of the government called Educar, that prepares that content not only for students but also special content for teachers. A question came to my mind, and I reminded my high school days. Who had a control over those books that we had? I have no idea. But was there something?
Thank you very much, Olga. So I will also probably shortly answer. In Russia, we have the same. So we have special standards for, let's say, for the programs, right, for the courses, which should in fact we should follow. But we also can introduce some, new things under these standards, right? So under these special rules and the books, we have official books, yes, which are approved for schools, for universities, and we have, let's say, unofficial books like more like fantasy or whatever, depending on the author, and that's actually depends, I think. Quality of this context and of this content, I think, depends on individual educators' values and beliefs, right? So that's quite interesting point. But we also have remote panelists wishing to talk on this topic. So Sarah, right, from Christian University, please. Please, Sarah. Thank you very much. Yes, so it should be on review, right? Tracy, please. And probably participants afterwards, participants on site. Yes, please.
So I just wanted to comment on the perhaps a hybrid model where in Diplo Foundation, for example, where I do some work, they are linked to a university, but they offer content that I consider to be, I guess, more industry-specific content. So what I've seen happen with that online content is that it's both reviewed by the University of Malta in one scenario, but depending on the particular course content, there's expert review from experts in the field. So if it's a diplomacy course, or if it's a course something a little more academic, you might find the university treating with it. But if it's something on critical infrastructure or cybersecurity, you tend to find industry experts doing the review of the content. So I think a hybrid model is important. And one of the things I do want to say is that in my country, the content in a university tends to have, it's very static, if that's what I would like to use. So it's sometimes not very relevant, especially in the areas of ICT. So we have people in our universities learning COBOL and C language in the days in Java and web technologies. So why we learn COBOL is because the university itself, even though it has the review structures and the curriculum in place and so on, hasn't yet been sensitized, if that's what I would use, to what's truly relevant in the industry. So you tend to find students coming out of that university who are not ready for the workplace. So I do want to encourage universities who offer open content, open educational resources, to ensure that they're reviewed not only by the university structures, but also seek to have industry relevance and perhaps some industry expert panels to look at it, especially as it's going into the online world.
Thank you very much, Tracy. So I'm just continuing following, the line. So from business perspective, from private sector, it's more about user-generated content, but it should be on review by the community for some time in order to put it somewhere, for, let's say, for wider community, right? In order to guarantee that it's a relevant content, that's it will be useful, right? So Professor Tao, you wanted to comment about MOOCs, right?
Yes.
Please.
Okay. I come from university, Beijing University of Post and Telecommunication. I talk something about open education resources in China, also some quality control. From my understanding, the idea of OER, Open Educational Resource, is an international application, something like Internet Plus. In our country, from this year, sometimes we see Internet Plus. So I think maybe OER, Open Educational Resources, is kind of Internet Plus education. And its ultimate target is to educate more people and to promote lifelong learning and personalized learning. In the end, development will benefit for the whole society. The development of OER in China is mainly driven by Chinese government. The Chinese government, such as Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Finance, has already invested a lot on OER, including open courses. We called College Video Open Course, CVOC, and MOOCs. For the open courses, iCourses, this is a website. iCourses is an official higher education course resources sharing platform. Now it has more than 1,000 open courses that freely accessible to everyone. In China, MOOC gains its popularity since the year 2011. Now, 54 Chinese universities have already opened their MOOCs on iCourse. Just like I said, this is a website. However, unlike some other popularity internet applications such as WeChat, we use WeChat, or maybe some of you use Facebook, which have millions of users. The number of subscribed students to MOOC is not so huge. Till last year, March, there are only 61,000 students registered to the iCourse. Most of them select engineering, and many of them select literature, and maybe some of them select some science, maybe. And in China, most open courses and MOOCs are lectured by professors with very stronger research background and teaching experience. These courses will be submitted to the Ministry of Education for initial review, and some may be rejected. Therefore, their quality can be somehow guaranteed. Moreover, I think maybe we can introduce a voting or recommendation system to assess the popularity of open courses and MOOCs. For example, when we come back a new city from here, if we want to find a better restaurant, we can work across the street, say which restaurant with many customers, maybe this one is better. And of course, we can look up website. If we can read some comments, and then maybe we can select a better restaurant. So I think voting or recommendation systems is very important. Students favor the courses which have many votes and recommendation from other students. Actually, in the university, every year the students will vote us. I mean, if we give lecture to students. I believe we should encourage university professors to produce much more open courses. I think this is very important. And students will have much wider and clearer choices over open courses and MOOCs, so they will have their incentive to attend the courses and the patience to complete them. I believe OER, or Open Educational Resources, target to education more people will be achieved all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tao. I just wanted, just to comment. I think Patrick mentioned here, by the way, so at the beginning, some metrics which should be introduced. You know, when we are talking about open educational resources, right, when we are talking about different content, without, let's say, connection to some particular university, we are talking about, you know, transnational, right, transborder access. And so it depends on media literacy, right? So media literacy of, you know, of users of this content. And that's why when we are talking about review, do you think we should use, you know, these metrics probably in terms of media literacy? Or, you know, another name, let's say so, right? But indicating, you know, who is going to understand, let's say, what's inside there, like different levels of education. So we might have also different levels of, you know, media literacy there, and so different outcomes out of these courses, right, or out of this content. So please, Patrick, and some comments. Yes, please.
The reason, one of the reasons why I love our conversations is because you know, we live in a world with vastly different perceptions on how to view different things, and being able to talk about these things and compare best practices is just unbelievable in terms of its value. And so thank you all. I wanted to share an experiment I did in this context because I know a couple of people have mentioned Wikipedia, and you know, Olga had talked about it, and there's a story here that I want to share that I think outlines the philosophy that I have, and that many of us have in Silicon Valley about approvals, and that essentially is that, you know, we don't need to worry about rating systems. The only rating system we need is the crowd. And if there's an accurate way to get the crowd, then it'll be, you know, your information will be rated. So let me tell you the story that I sort of experiment that I went through in order to reach that conclusion on my own. Right in 2004, when I moved back from Belgium to the University of Colorado, I was teaching a course on standards. It was really a course on the policy impact of standards. I'm not a lawyer. I'm sorry, I'm a lawyer, not a engineer. So it was about the different kind of roles of standards bodies. And one of the things that was just fascinating is if you think about content, how do you generate content? And is there a standard for the creation of content? And of course, you know, there really isn't. We were moving, and we still are, moving away from a world where publishers received information, received manuscripts, and either chose or not to publish something in a book. That world is gone. Aspects of it's still around. But today, if you want to publish, you just put your information out on a blog, and it's there. If you want to write a book, you can use it, and through Amazon Publishing Services, you've got a book. None of the traditional gatekeepers that were necessary in a world where there was real scarcity of materials or to be able to produce these things that the internet has taken away. We have just a different world today where that can happen. And so in 2004, I got into a number of debates with colleagues and with just friends of mine about whether or not Wikipedia was as accurate as encyclopedias. And I said, and I have my old emails that I've shared with my friends to back this up. I said to them, I will guarantee you, this is in 2004 when Britannica was still around and Encarta was still existing. Remember, Encarta was a Microsoft project where you take CDs. These are articles written by professionals, taken on CDs, and you put them on your computer. And Microsoft was getting into the business. I said, I'll bet you that all those companies are going to go out of business, and that Wikipedia is going to become the most trusted source. And everybody said there's no way Wikipedia can become the most trusted source because we don't know who's writing the articles. We have a saying in the United States for the average person. It's kind of a slang saying. We call him Joe Sixpack. So Joe Sixpack is the guy that you know, comes home every day with his six-pack of beer. You know, drinks his beer, and you know, for many of us, that's sort of the stereotypical character in the United States. And so the idea that Joe Sixpack is, could be contributing to a Wikipedia article versus, Dr. Ryan is just offensive to many people because that's not the system we know. But as it turns out, as Olga mentions, these systems are self-healing because what you have is now a set of resources where people are able to constantly edit and approve and provide feedback. So it may be that Joe Sixpack may have the information wrong, but he may be on the ground. He may know a fact that a PhD may not know or be able to research. And if he's wrong or if he says it wrong, it turns out that other Joe Sixpacks that are also in the know of that area can fix it. And you don't even know or care what their educational level is. All that matters is whether the content makes sense. Who approves whether the content makes sense? Again, it's just the crowd. If generally people look at things and agree that things are right, they're going to surface by metrics that are so simple, because it's a number of page views, a number of refreshes. You can look at how long people look at sites and whether they're cited, whether they're referred to in other cases. And so these are traditional metrics that also come from the book sector, the old world, where you would have a book, it'd be printed, and you kind of print another book. It just took 5 years. Now you can do all that in the course of just a couple of days. But it's no less relevant. It's just as relevant. In the experiment I did, I had my students, and I'm almost done here. But in the experiment I did, I had my students, because I wanted to establish myself that this was true, that multiple Joe Sixpacks were going to be fast and efficient and actually do anything. And so I assigned my students to do 2 Wikipedia entries. One, they had to create an entry that was just absolutely false. Now, I wouldn't ask for this today because it's really against the credo of Wikipedia. I'm a little embarrassed to admit it. One of the gentlemen that's here is Mike Godwin. I'm glad he's not here today, but Mike Godwin, if you see him, is the author of Godwin's Law. Look it up on Wikipedia. It's absolutely fascinating. Mike is here. He was the general counsel of Wikipedia, and I'm afraid he would probably find some way to issue a fine to me if he heard the story, so promise me you won't tell him. But I had my students write 2 articles. One article was to write something false, intently false. The other one was to just go in and edit an article that we had a minimum number of editors. I had a number of people, and to put in a new fact. And just to explain that experience in class. It was a very simple request. And what happened was, across the board, with one outlier of the 30 or so students, all of the articles that were put in that were false, all of them were taken down almost immediately by another Wikipedian. Almost immediately. Or if not, they were taken down within the case of maybe a week or 2. Try it. Put up an article about something that just doesn't exist. See how long it stays up there. Or go into an article that's heavily edited and try it. I'm going to retract that. I'm not telling you to do this because this is not the way that we want to treat Wikipedia. So retract that. But I can promise you that I did this and this happened, and it's really a fascinating experience. And so and of course now it's many years later, and Encarta is gone. The Encyclopedia Britannica is gone. All of these curators of information, these professional curators, are gone. They're out of business because their information is irrelevant. And so this is the foundation, I believe, for the future of education, where you go to exactly what Mikhail alluded to. You're going to really still require a curator. Somebody needs to do that. But that curator is no longer, in my view, the state. It's no longer even necessarily bodies that kind of look at that. That's gone. You can get instant feedback from the people that you're serving. That's it. And then you have your professor, your person, and you're really relying heavily on the morals and values of that person. That's an excellent point that you made, and I believe that is as subjective and as maybe unsatisfying as that may be. I believe that's the future, and I believe that's where we're going to head with the future in education.
Thank you very much for very interesting comments. So I would like to ask on-site participants, do you have any comments or questions to the panelists? Otherwise, I will continue to ask another yes, please, the first, yes. Can we have a microphone on site here? Oh, it's over there, yes. And could you please, give a name? Okay.
Yes, my name is Jutta Kroll. I am representing the Digital Opportunities Foundation from Germany. And we've been working there for nearly 15 years in overcoming the digital divide. And I would like to pick up on the point that Olga made. When it comes to the question of quality assurance of open educational resources, to our opinion, the most important thing is teaching media literacy first. Because if people just don't understand that, they have to question any content they find on the internet. They just take it for true. So firstly, they need to learn how the content comes onto the internet, how that not everything that you find on the internet is quality checked, that they have to play a role in community assessing the content, and that's all part of the digital literacy training. So I would say that that should come first, and then we can follow up with everything else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would probably add, in Russia, so we're actively discussing now media literacy, starting from, from high schools, starting from first grade, when kids already in school, because they already have, digital devices, right? And so they have to deal, unfortunately or fortunately anyway, they have to deal with different types of information already from from their first days at school, and that's why we are discussing actively media literacy teaching and training. And I think it's a good point. So I truly believe that as an outcome of this workshop, we should think about, from one point of view, capacity building in terms of those who are going to create that those courses or special training programs of media literacy, or supporting this organization in terms of private partnership, public-private partnership. There was another question, yes, from one side participant, please.
Hi, my name is Grace Mutumu from Kenya, and also from the Internet Society Ambassadors Program. My concern, being a Kenyan, which is a developing country, is that sometimes there is over concentration on qualification. I think sometime back, in my country, there was a policy by the government that you would need a certain qualification called ICDL in order to show that you're computer literate. That was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. When you think about it now, it is laughable, because everybody who comes to a big city somehow becomes computer literate. And so for me, the question of open educational resources brings the other question: why do we need open educational resources? For me, it is to give youth life skills. If we give them life skills, then we shall help to bridge the digital divide. And so I will, if there were two sides to support, I would support the side of, let us have more content that will help to give people life skills, whether it is content on that is academic, or whether it's content that is about maybe traditional knowledge, like Tracy had talked about, and then let the users be the ones to decide the quality. Because, for example, if I wanted to learn yoga, which is a life skill that could give me a job back in my village, I would look for the YouTube video or for the PDF document that has the most likes. So that is what is important to me, and the users have already defined the quality for me. So as far as we are talking about developing countries and bridging the digital divide, it is the user-generated content that rules.
Thank you very much. Oh, yes, please, Tracy. Yes.
I want to respond to that quickly. And I remember someone once told me when we were building applications and for this kind of work, that did anybody teach anybody how to use Facebook or YouTube? Is there a manual? No. So when you go onto those locations and you see the people using it, there's no manual. But as Grace is saying, it depends on the people who are using it. It's almost the community is telling you now, this is what we like, this is what we're interested in, this is the validation we're giving to this type of content. And it's very important, I think, now for academia and for traditional education to understand that things are, as with other types of knowledge, the music industry has seen it, the books, everything has seen a change and a shift, that the user-generated situation is emerging, and that we should really look to build and bridge those gaps now, so we don't only focus on strict qualifications and strict, rigid ways of looking at things, but also on what users and what the community is telling us is in fact the way that people are thinking and feeling. Thank you.
Patrick, you wanted to comment? Yes, please.
Yes, Joseph Schumpeter was an Austrian economist that came up with this idea of creative destruction, and that you have an industry that's established, and it's not usually another competing industry that's just as established that takes it over, but something new and unexpected that eats you and you're gone. And you're replaced, and there's a lot of examples of Schumpeter in action. We've seen, just for example, and just one that comes to mind is Blockbuster Video. There was a big videotape when you want to get videotapes in the United States. Now, Blockbuster was a big company, and they're gone. There's many of those because new technologies come to replace them. And in that context, I think that we all, and I spend a good amount of time in academia myself, and so this is why is important to me. And I spent the time also getting these academic qualifications. Oh my gosh. For those of us that want to teach, how long does it take to get those qualifications? And years and years, and you write and you publish and get that done, and you want that to be worth something. I'm of the belief that that it's increasingly going to be worth less. And we can talk about that, whether that's right or wrong, but I do believe that the internet and the way that the internet brings information to people and democratizes information is going to make the value of degrees much less than they have been in the past. And that, in turn, is going to lessen the need for accreditation, for review, for almost any body licensing. We're getting to a place where just the information itself is all people need. You don't need degrees. And we have a world already, certainly in the United States, where very senior leaders, some of the world's best leaders in our area. So Bill Gates, Michael Dell, who is the founder of Dell Computer, Richard Branson, the CEO of Virgin Group, what do they have in common? Does anybody know what they have in common? They have in common that they didn't graduate college. Yeah, right. Which is, I just think that's fascinating, right? And so, we're increasingly accepting that that these traditional measures in degrees and certifications aren't so relevant as much as it gets big into this question of morals and how you are as a person. And these guys are pretty successful. They've done some bad things, like everybody has, but the point here is that you don't need to have the traditional metrics or necessarily the traditional standards and certifications of the past in order to be extremely successful today. And I would ask the question is whether we think that's going to change. Is that trend going to continue to change, or are these just aberrations? I think it's absolutely a sign of Schumpeterian economics in play. I think the future is going to be very reflective, and as academics, we need to keep that in mind.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Any other comments or questions from on-site participants? Yes, please. And technical assistance, could you tell me if you have any questions from remote participants? No? No? Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Deirdre Williams from St. Lucia in the Caribbean. It was what Patrick was just saying. Recently, we've been having arguments about governments giving laptops and tablets to children. Now, maybe you spoke about this before I arrived because I was late, but I wonder if Patrick or anyone, you see, I was just about to look up the name of the man, I've forgotten it, but the man whose idea was there and then one laptop per child. No, not Negroponte. The educational side, he was a psychologist and an engineer, and he did Logo. Do you know who I mean? No, I don't. Anyway, his educational theory was wonderful, fascinating, and it's really sad that it degenerated into a commercial means of selling cheap laptops to children in developing countries or whatever. But what you're talking about was what he was saying, that you just let the child educate itself, by and large. Do you think now, with your creative destruction, that that's what's going to happen? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a little bit different. I believe that there's a certain degree of education. I believe there's a certain degree of self-education that'll be available. But I think for the most part, you're going to get into a world where it's not going to be an individual effort. There's going to be feedback that's going to be social around it. Maybe this people in your physical proximity, like for example, if you want to learn how to be one of the colleagues said a yoga instructor, well, you might look at other people online that are doing the same thing and sort of see what they're reading and see what they've been doing. And in your particular geography, the internet might help you sort of show what types of yoga are best to be served. You may find that vinyasa is not offered in your village, and but Bikram is, and so you can sort of differentiate. And what a great opportunity to use the online services to research that before you do it, and still then educate yourself on. It doesn't matter what the certification is. You educate yourself, but you're not really doing it by yourself because you're getting guidance. You're getting guidance, and you're getting your handhelds by others that have walked this path before, that have looked at it, and they may be next to you, they may be online, they're sending indications in some way, and it's not the way that we would think of it in the traditional sense, but they are giving you indications. So it is more than one person. And then I still believe that in a true educational context, that yes, I do believe, this is a little controversial, but yes, I believe you can give a laptop with full internet access to children. There's a lot of crazy stuff online, but I believe you address that by educating children. This whole discussion about digital media literacy, I think, has moved away from the idea that there's a separate discussion of digital media literacy. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but I do believe that the education for digital media literacy is just something of the past. What we need to think about is just education. Today, education includes digital media, if not secondarily, certainly primarily and exclusively in many cases. So, through the medium, we're going to teach that, and we're going to teach people as children how to differentiate between different qualities of things online. It's not obvious online, maybe the first time you look online, but people learn. You learn signals about quality, and you learn as you grow older when you're writing a paper that you need to write footnotes, and that there's a certain kind of subjective value in the kinds of footnotes. And so I think that replaces this notion in many ways of a separate digital media literacy, because we're going to think about it in a much broader context, and that itself is going to create an environment that creates an educational system that continues to grow.
Thank you very much. As we are, have like 10-12 minutes more, I would like, within this context, I would like to move, to the question in terms of special domain zone. I think, that good example of .edu, right? So, which I think United States introduced. So, in terms of policies there, it ensures, that there are institutions registered under this domain zone, right? So their courses or content or these institutions are certified by, agencies, educational agencies there. Do you think we should focus on special separate domain zone for, these, let's say, courses which are approved by special, let's say, stakeholder, like government, for instance, because we are following that multi-stakeholder approach, right, in terms of open education as well. So we have business, introducing different services and different platforms. We have educational institutions, right, using these platforms, sometimes participating in creations their own platforms, right. We have government introducing, governmental platforms. We have international organizations. But do you think under the probably UNESCO umbrella or I don't know, any other organization, so there should be a special domain zone which would ensure that international quality, and we should give opportunity to, to the end users to choose, which courses to follow, either which provided by the business, either which provided by, that international organization, and why? Because from my opinion, there should be that choice. Why? Because if we have international organizations participating in creating, this, or different other authorities participating in creating this content, so they can, officially issue some, let's say, certificates which will be recognized, because legal aspect which was touched a little bit here, is quite important. You know, not everywhere in the world, not in all the countries, officially open educational resources are accepted. Even reference to open content is not accepted in some countries, right? So, what do you think about it? Any opinions? Too long question. Okay, Israel should be special, you know, domain zone under the international organizations, providing, you know, those courses and ensuring, you know, the quality and probably issuing some certificates, you know, under international umbrella. Or it should be like, you know, like we have now, I think. We have, let's say, open space there. International organizations, they use either they create their own like Diplo, I think I do really like Diplo system, right? Or they might use Coursera or some other, you know, platforms. What do you think?
On some level now we have a system that is overlaid in multiple different ways. In the United States we have regional accreditation. There's 5 different regional accreditors. There's some national accreditations for certain kinds of topics. There's topical accreditation, and these are all sort of a market for accreditation because some accreditations matter, some really don't. And so having a stamp doesn't necessarily really mean anything except for reputationally, at least in the United States, because we tend to use a very open approach in that sense, where anybody can sort of say, "Hey, I'm going to be an accreditor," and then, you know, as crazy as that sounds in a lot of other places of the world, we just say, "Okay, that's fine," and we're going to leave it to the general public to look at that and decide whether or not that particular accreditation is sensible or not, and whether or not they follow it. And so I think that I believe that the countries that are looking to ban open source material and open materials from the public do so at their peril, because they're competing with countries that don't. And I would say that generally, I mean, there may be some exceptions to this rule, but I would say that generally, the people that are organizing that and that are making those decisions just aren't going to be able to keep up. I mean, just in the case of YouTube alone, there's more than 100 hours of new content uploaded every single minute. It's so fast that, you know, there's certainly no human at Google that can do it. We've given up. We never even tried, because our intent was to use the computers to do that and have systems do that. And so those other older systems are saying, hey, we're still on this old world. It's really very analog. They're not even accepting that the material exists almost. And that's just unfortunate, I think, because it leaves the citizens out from an opportunity to really learn a lot.
Okay. Before I move on, I would like to name the person that Deirdre was referring. His name is Simu Papert. He is a citizen of Pretoria, South Africa, and founded in Wikipedia. About domain names, I would like to contribute on that. In Argentina, we have .edu.ar, which is part of our national second level of our national ccTLD.ar, and you can have a .edu.ar if you are somehow accredited academic institution or a school or a high school. In Spanish, we have a sello de goma. You have a sello de goma means that you only have a stamp and maybe you have nothing behind. So certifications are fine, but sometimes, as I usually say, you have to check the sources, check who are the organizations involved. So that is important. If there would be a specific kind of TLD, you mentioned something like that, TLD for those. The problem that you have is TLDs are global. So I honestly, I don't know. We had so much discussions in the GAC about those TLDs being global, but I will stop here. We should think about it.
Yes, please, Tracy. Oh, yeah, okay. On face, yes.
Okay, thank you. I believe in terms of top-level domain, that's a bit tricky, considering the question is, when you put it under top-level domain, is it still open? And if it's open, who's responsible? Because I would like to believe, for instance, in Kenya, the course has to be aligned to the curriculum in Kenya. So if you set it global, for instance, the course in America could be different from whatever is in Kenya or Uganda or Tanzania. So probably if you set it regional, yes. So I still stick to the traditional methods, and one, peer reviews, whereby people who are knowledgeable in the subject matter can give approval. or experts in a specific subject matter, for instance, a professor or a doctor. And then lastly, approval ratings. For instance, if an article is maybe approved highly, maybe it has 5 stars or 5 as the highest rank, then I think that will be good to go. Yes, thank you.
So over the last maybe 15 years in my life, I've moved from an employee to more of an employer. And I've quickly come to realize that certifications are the least of my concerns. As you hire employees who are certified or with master's degrees or whatever, you tend to find that the people who really do contribute and really do bring value to your organization tend to be people beyond the certification. So it's, on the one hand, it might be experience, the other hand, it might be the personality. It's a series of other factors. So I'm very loath to treat with certifications now as we're dealing with the issue of certifications. And the reality of certifications is that it's just one check in the box of how you move from one part of your life to another. So I do think there's an opportunity for some sort of real world type validation of that training. So the OER type world allows, I think, for that kind of moving to that model where you could have even I like the idea of peer validation, or reference checks is what we call it in the in the HR world, I guess. So you're looking to see if someone else can fit your organization. It's beyond whether they have a degree or beyond a master's or whatever they have. Are they a fit? Are they a good choice? Do they have the passion? Will they work the hours you need? Well, those are the kind of things you're looking for. And maybe in this new dispensation where some sort of, I don't know if it's a TLD or I don't know what it can be, but it could be some other method of evaluating when you do educate yourself, because you do need education. Do you need a degree or do you need some other validation? I think that's important. I'm not sure how to address it. I think that's what I'm looking for, something else beyond the certification itself.
Thank you very much, Tracy. So as we have, several minutes, if you have any other questions from on-site participants, so please. And just to sum up, I would say that we discussed, most of the questions, I would say, and that's very nice. It's great. Please.
My name is Mwendwa Kivuva from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm an Internet Society ambassador. We find that there is so much public knowledge that has been generated through maybe funded through taxpayers' money, like the research that is always done in most of the countries. So we find that that information, most of it is actually not public knowledge. What can we do probably to engage the people who are holding that knowledge to release it into the masses? Especially this is something that will really help the developing countries. Thank you.
Patrick, yeah, please.
These are open government initiatives, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot of information out there that just isn't available, and citizens that paid for it should have access to it. Even if it's not good, why not put it online? Then it's there. And the challenge in that is well known because it depends on human effort. And so you've got, in some cases, you need to scan it, you need to put it up there, you need to sort of mechanize it. And so the answer to that is by, first of all, doing what you're doing right now, just raising the attention to it, and just making sure that people are alerted to it. And it's one of those topics that you got to bring home, so to speak. Everybody has to sort of bring home. And if they want to get their municipality or city or village to go online, go talk to them about what their online strategy is, and if they don't know, and then find tools to help. That's really the best way to go about it. Because particularly in the rural context, there's other examples in a much broader context, like the government of Estonia that's really done everything online. Now that's great. That's not going to work in a lot of rural. Where the next 3 billion are going to come online, and that's not going to work for a while. We need to be realistic about that. It's much more practical, but there are other options available that very well-heeled governments have implemented, like Estonia.
Please, short comment from Professor Tao.
Yeah. Here was a case from our side, side. our university first stronger in information and telecommunications. The government want to encourage our professors to present the principle of communication. It's very important. Very important for WE students. So one professor named Yang in BOPT, our university, now he is a leader of the National Outstanding Teaching Team of this course. This is a very higher award. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I guess we almost on time. That's great. I would like to thank all the panelists for coming, for sharing their experience, sharing their ideas and opinion. And I would say I will definitely circulate report in order to to put some corrections. But I guess we discussed most of the questions which we wanted to discuss. I would like to thank on-site participants for your participation, for asking questions, and I do hope that it was useful for you. I would like to thank remote participants and remote panelists, and also technical assistants. So on-site, thank you very much, and I do hope that we will continue next year, but with more, let's say, deep focus on either metrics or some other topics connected to this, to the education and open educational resource. Thank you very much. Thank you.
How about take photo? Okay. Actually, I've stayed.